The pointer circled madly around. The gears gave out small sparks at an invisible place under the dial. Some kind of innate fear made every part of my body scream, making a terrible sound. Would I end this way? The man held me in his hand with even greater strength, and the trembling of his body was truly conveyed to me. But I was no longer in the mood to poke fun at the embarrassment of the man who was normally so calm, for I had felt the great attraction coming from the other end of the black vortex. In the cover of darkness, the pointer jumped out of me and finally stopped at 1917. Everything in sight was swallowed up. The turbulent air, strong enough to tear down an asteroid, was pulling all the objects of the coil into the vortex. What would be waiting for us? To be ruthlessly torn away, or forever lost in time? Maybe the man was thinking the same thing as I was. I could sense the changes in his emotion. Suffering, confusion, hesitation. But no fear. Why wasn't he afraid like other human beings? After all, we were about to face the most powerful thing of all, time. He wasn't my first owner, nor the only one who possessed the power of time. But from the moment I was picked up by him, I could clearly feel the power lurking beneath the calm surface of this man named Victor. The electromagnetic wave from nowhere stimulated his evolve, pumping its energy out of his bloodstream little by little, until the energy could no longer be repressed. It finally tore the space around him that could not bear his power. What I didn't expect was that the day would come so soon. Unlike my panicked state, maybe the man had already been mentally prepared for this. He had finished the company's affairs and settled everything about the girl a few days ago. However, he was so caught off guard that he didn't have the chance to say goodbye to her face to face. Before the moment arrived, the last thing he did was not to run away, not to scream in fear, but to make a phone call to reassure the girl whom he may never see again.
I hope to see you in the future.
The man's voice was as usual, as if he was certain to see her on the other side of time. But what if he has lost his future? Human beings are incredible. Even though I had felt this thousands of times, this time they still impressed me. The time we spent in the twisted hallway may have just been a minute, or for a long time. The next moment the sunlight appeared, I saw the gray sky and the unfamiliar, yet familiar, high buildings underneath it. Could this be the future? The joy of surviving made my body tremble a little. Some tiny parts inside my body gave out unnoticeable sounds of collision that a human could barely hear. However, if such things would happen more often, even a metal instrument like me could not be able to bear it, let alone a human made of flesh and blood. I looked at the man, who stopped on the street and looked at the intersection with slight confusion in his eyes. The energy was still restlessly moving around him and could go out of control again at any time. This man knew better than I did. At this point in time, he could only stay for a short while. the man finally released his grip on me, and his sudden departure allowed me to catch my breath from the enormous pressure he had exerted. Then he walked quickly and firmly, without hesitation. Was he going to look for his future self, or Mr. Chuck, who might know what had been going on? As I wondered, the surrounding roads and buildings gradually became familiar, and I began to realize his destination, the office building where the girl's company was located. But the once familiar building had been long gone, leaving only a museum built with glass and steel.
What happened?
There was a hint of irrepressible tremor and anxiety in the man's voice. The hand grasping me trembled, trying to suppress the pain of the violent energy within him. He walked in another direction. The end of the road was a desolate ruin. A passerby gave a surprised look at the man who shouldn't be there. He said,
"Nobody has lived here for ages. Probably since that thing happened."
As the passerby chatted, I saw the pupils of the man contract violently, as if I could read the suppressed vacillation and fear from his unruffled face. The man went everywhere: the studio, the TV station, the coffee shop. The minutes ticked by. Finally, he got tired and slumped on a park bench. If people from that world saw him, no one would recognize him as Victor. That girl, she seemed to have disappeared in the future. And this could only mean one thing, something that he could not accept. 99, 98, 97. I watched the lights in the distance while counting down the hours, wondering how long the man on the bench was going to be depressed and devastated. After all, human beings can be rather fragile, both mentally and sentimentally. A tiny core within me was constantly flashing and sending messages to my true maker. This is what my owners will never discover. Victor stood up before I counted backwards to 1. What I expected didn't happen, and his determined look told me that he hadn't given up. It finally got me wondering, what was this man going to do? What else could he do? After all, the rotation of time is the world's most ruthless existence, with no exception. Just like my previous owner, he gave my other half to his beloved girl. Time and space could not separate them, but in the end, he was left alone. If time is a game of the gods, human beings are just like the chess pieces on a board, being moved around and played with. In the end, they can only accept their own destiny, just as they accept the inevitability of death. The man's gaze drifted back and fell on me, and the pointer stopped at the same moment, 1917. Just a normal number. But I remembered this time because it was etched in history forever. The moment when half the world's population was about to die. A grim number that all humanity, except those who strayed into the future, would deeply remember. Without warning, the surrounding energy began to move restlessly. The man raised his hand to press his forehead. All hesitation faded from his eyes, leaving only one emotion: determination. I withdrew my surprise, and soon figured out what he was going to do, something bold and thrilling. I never expected to see a man who decided to use the power of time and space again. After the previous one, did he not understand how dangerous it could be to travel across time? Why do human beings always do unbelievable things like this? This man that I know of was not the first one who intended to change the outcome by time traveling, and he certainly would not be the last. None of them had a good ending, because what awaits on the other side will only be death or eternal departure. Silently, I was expecting the same fate to fall upon him, as an inexplicable feeling suddenly emerged from my body. The core kept flashing, and somehow I felt something. It seemed so far away, at the other end of the galaxy. It could not be touched or perceived. It was like a bright star in the boundless night, guiding the way for the lost. A tiny voice came from the twisted passage. The man's breath stopped, and all the sounds around him seemed to have died away. I heard his voice shake as he asked,
Are you there?
Victor?
The next moment, the girl's voice came through me. Unexpected things always make people distressed, as I was at that moment. I've always been proud of the long years I've lived through. Everything that was happening seemed to me like a repeat of the past. By then, what I had always believed in was broken, so much so that I was left with only one question. Why was this happening? The man grasped me and trembled, disbelief taking over his heart, making the vital organ throb. Was I like a red line, crossing the 2 points in time that might never meet, and linking them together? I shuddered at the thought. Fortunately, this particularly uncomfortable conversation didn't last long. The electric current rattled twice, and there was no more sound. The man called the girl's name again and again, but did not get a reply. But there was no time for him to explore. Only a meter behind us, in midair, the city lights and the night sky began to twist, whirling noiselessly into an endless vortex. The man turned around and frowned. What would happen this time? When we were pulled into the passage of time, I heard the man grunt painfully, and without warning, my dial developed an invisible crack. Well, it seemed that the backlash from time traveling was working on us at last. After all, the power of time is always accompanied by the shadow of destruction. The cracks on the dial grew denser and denser, and I felt severe fatigue. The man was also exhausted. Sweat seeped from his forehead, and every step he took was heavy. Although his figure was still straight and upright, it was likely to fall at any time. We had done this countless times, shuttling back and forth, searching and getting disappointed again and again. Would this man have fallen down already if he hadn't been able to contact the girl across time? Even though I had met countless people, I could not easily judge him. That is because everything he did kept overturning my previous experience. I didn't understand what it was that kept him going. Was it some kind of ethereal human sentiment? At that time, on that deserted dock, there seemed to be some kind of energy pulling the man forward step by step. The world was quiet. A crow sat motionless on a run-down shipping container. The waves on the shore stood high above. The time stopped. Why did it stop? The transmitter in my core began to run wildly. The tiny cracks widened. Panic, remorse, restlessness. All sorts of emotions sprang upon me, and bad omens filled my mind. The man sped past a huge shipping container. Two figures, one tall and one short, were facing each other on a rust-colored gray clearing. The setting sun dragged their long shadows down to his feet. The last thing that could happen in this time was seeing his future self. The tall figure plunged a sharp object unhesitatingly into the chest of the other. He finally found the girl he had been looking for at another point in time, but the reality was crueler than all he could imagine.
It was me.
The man's breathing became rapid. A drop of some warm liquid fell on my body and splashed, just like his remaining hope before this scene dissolved into dust. I sighed silently, knowing that this might be their ending. Time cannot be reversed, and the future, which has become history, can never be changed. This is the rule I have known from the day I was made. The black airstream surged violently, restraining the man from stepping forward. For countless days and nights, he tried everything to find his way back to the past, and now it suddenly appeared in front of him. At the end of this long passage of time, I felt another familiar breath. At this moment, my stalled hand was turning rapidly counterclockwise, and the gears were still holding their final turn before they broke. This time, I finally figured it out. Maybe it was the end. Click. My cracks extended like densely woven cobwebs. No one can avoid the cost of time travel. What is waiting for me is destruction. But what is waiting for the man? All the light was gone before my eyes, and my mind completely shattered into infinite time and space.